The rain had a strange rhythm that evening. Soft, uncertain, as if the sky itself hesitated to let go. The glass doors of the Grand Royal Hotel shimmered beneath the neon reflections of the city lights. Inside, the marble lobby gleamed, polished to perfection, filled with the faint hum of wealthy travelers and the muted clink of crystal glasses. Among them, dressed in the uniform of quiet dignity, stood Elena, a young waitress whose eyes carried the calm of storms not yet told. She moved with practiced grace, a tray balanced effortlessly in her hand. Her black hair was neatly tied, her smile polite but distant, an expression she'd learned to wear like armor. The guests came and went, speaking in accents from around the world, their laughter echoing off marble and glass. To them, she was invisible. A shadow that brought their drinks, cleared their plates, and melted into the background. That night, though, one man noticed her. He sat alone at a table near the window, a figure of casual arrogance draped in designer fabric. Victor Harrington, a self-made millionaire whose name often appeared in magazines beside words like visionary and ruthless. His laughter was the kind that filled a room even when no one else found the joke funny. A cigar rested in a crystal ashtray beside his untouched steak. He'd flown in for a conference and seemed to enjoy the power his presence commanded. When Elena approached, her voice was soft. "Good evening, sir. May I bring you anything else?" Victor leaned back, his sharp blue eyes flicking over her name tag. "Elena," he said, savoring the sound. "Pretty name. You're not from around here, are you?" "No, sir," she replied simply, her accent faint, her tone measured. He tilted his head. "Where are you from?" "Spain," she lied. It was easier that way. She'd learned early that revealing too much invited the kind of attention she didn't need. He smiled. A slow, amused curl of the lips. "Spain, huh? So you speak Spanish?" "Yes, sir." "Good," he said. "Then serve me in English, and I'll pay you $1,000. The words hung in the air like a challenge, half joke, half arrogance. The nearby tables fell silent for a heartbeat, as if the room itself were listening. Elena blinked, uncertain whether she'd heard right. "I beg your pardon." Victor chuckled, swirling the wine in his glass. "You heard me. I like testing people. You're a waitress, right? So serve me. But only in English, and if you manage to impress me, I'll give you $1,000. A few guests at the bar turned, smirking. It was entertainment to them, a game played by the rich. Elena stood still, her pulse quickening. She'd met men like him before. The ones who mistook humility for weakness, silence for ignorance. She forced a small smile. "As you wish, sir," she said softly, switching to flawless English. "Would you like me to begin by removing your plate, or shall I refill your wine first?" Victor's eyebrows lifted slightly. Her accent was crisp, precise, every syllable deliberate. For the first time that evening, his smirk faltered. "Well," he said, leaning forward, "not bad. Not bad at all. Thank you," she replied, collecting his plate with steady hands. He watched her closely now, curiosity replacing mockery. "So you studied English?" "Among other things." "What other things?" She hesitated, then said, "Languages." He chuckled. "Languages? How many do you know?" "5." She answered simply, meeting his gaze for the first time. The table beside them went still. One of the businessmen whispered something under his breath. Victor's laugh returned, loud and incredulous. 5 languages. Really? That's cute. Which ones?" "El inglés, el español, le francés, Dutch, and Italiano," she said fluidly, each tongue rolling effortlessly from her lips, her posture unshaken. The millionaire's smile froze. The air shifted. It was no longer a game. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, with a faint chuckle, he gestured to the chair across from him. "Sit," he said. "If you're going to impress me, do it properly." Elena hesitated. She wasn't supposed to sit with guests. Hotel policy forbade it. But something in his tone made refusal feel like defiance. Slowly, she sat. Victor leaned forward, elbows on the table. "You don't look like someone who had the privilege of learning 5 languages," he said, voice low, probing. "I didn't," she replied quietly. "I learned them because I had to." He smirked. "Because you had to? That sounds dramatic. Were you running from something?" Her eyes drifted to the window where rain streaked the glass. "Yes," she whispered. "But not something you'd understand." Something about her tone, the steadiness, the quiet pain behind it, made even Victor pause. He wasn't used to being spoken to that way, least of all by someone in uniform. He laughed again, but softer this time. "You're interesting, Elena. Maybe worth more than 1,000 after all." She stood then, smoothing her apron. I don't need your money, sir, she said gently. Only your respect. And with that, she turned to leave. Victor watched her go, a strange expression flickering across his face. For the first time in a long while, someone had left him speechless. Outside, thunder rolled across the night sky. Elena exhaled deeply, unaware that this single conversation would change both their lives forever. The next morning, the hotel buzzed with its usual rhythm. Valets rushing out into the drizzle. The scent of roasted coffee curling through the air, the sound of luggage wheels clattering across the marble floor. Elena arrived early as always, her steps quiet but determined. Her uniform was crisp. Her expression calm, though beneath it, a faint unease stirred. She hoped the previous night's incident had been forgotten. But fate rarely forgets moments like that. Victor Harrington was already in the restaurant when she entered. He sat in the same seat by the window, a fresh newspaper folded beside his untouched breakfast. The moment he saw her, that familiar smirk returned, though softer now, less mockery, more curiosity. "Elena," he greeted, his voice carrying across the room. "Good morning." She hesitated, forcing a polite nod. "Good morning, sir." He gestured to the table. "Join me for a moment. I promise I won't bite." She froze. The other waiters glanced at her nervously, whispering, sitting with a guest again could mean losing her job. But before she could speak, Victor called out to the manager, who happened to be walking past. "Excuse me," Victor said smoothly. "I'd like this young lady to assist me personally with translation. I have some calls with international partners today, and she seems uniquely qualified." The manager blinked. "Mr. Harrington. She's part of our serving staff, not. I'll pay her for her time." Victor interrupted, his tone leaving no room for argument. "And I'll compensate the hotel for the inconvenience." Money had a way of making rules flexible. Within minutes, Elena found herself seated at his table once more, a steaming cup of coffee placed before her. She could feel the stares from her co-workers. Half envy, half disbelief. Victor leaned back, studying her with quiet intrigue. "I did a little digging," he said casually. "You've been here about a year. Came from somewhere in Eastern Europe, didn't you? Not Spain?" Elena's heart skipped. "You looked me up." He shrugged. "Curiosity is a habit of mine." "Then you already know what you want to know," she replied, her tone cool. Victor chuckled. "Not even close. You fascinate me. 5 languages, no formal education listed. How does someone like you end up waiting tables in a luxury hotel?" She sipped her coffee slowly, buying time. The question wasn't simple to answer. "Because life doesn't care how many languages you speak when you're hungry," she said finally. Her words hung in the air like smoke. For a moment, even Victor didn't know what to say. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "I like honest people," he said. "How about this? Translate a few calls for me today. I'll pay you $1,000. The same as last night." Elena met his gaze. "Why? You don't need me for that. You could hire a professional interpreter." "True," he admitted, "but professionals bore me." "You don't," she exhaled slowly. She could walk away. She should walk away. But rent was due, and her mother's medical bills were piling up back home. Pride didn't pay for medicine. "Fine," she said at last. "Just for today." His smile widened. "Deal." For the next few hours, Elena sat beside Victor in his suite, translating calls in French, Spanish, and German with effortless fluency. His associates on the other end of the line were impressed. One even assumed she was a high-level interpreter. Victor watched her carefully the entire time. Not with the predatory amusement of the night before, but with genuine admiration. "You're remarkable," he said when the final call ended. "I'm doing my job," she replied simply. He laughed quietly. "You remind me of myself when I was young, hungry, relentless." "I'm not like you," she said softly. "No," he said, after a pause. "You're better." The compliment caught her off guard. For a fleeting second she saw something human in him. Something behind the arrogance. Then his phone buzzed, and the moment broke. By evening, the sky had cleared, washing the city in gold. Elena stood on the hotel terrace, the crisp air brushing her face. In her pocket, the promised envelope of money felt both heavy and hollow. $1,000, enough to send home, enough to buy some peace. Yet, it didn't feel right. As she stared out over the skyline, Victor appeared beside her, holding 2 glasses of wine. "You didn't think I'd forget to toast our little partnership, did you?" "I'm not allowed to drink on duty," she said. He smiled, extending the glass anyway. "Then consider this off the record." She hesitated, then accepted. They stood in silence, the city humming below. After a while Victor spoke again. You know, Elena, I wasn't always rich. I used to wash dishes at a cafe smaller than this terrace. People looked right through me, just like they do to you. The difference is, I decided to make them see me. And what did it cost you? She asked quietly. He looked at her, expression unreadable. Everything, he said. The honesty in his voice unsettled her. She turned to leave, but he caught her arm gently. Come work for me, he said suddenly. Not as a waitress. As my assistant, I'll pay you 10 times what the hotel does. Elena froze. The offer was tempting, life-changing even. But something in his tone made her wary. I'll think about it, she said, pulling away. Do that, he murmured, watching her go. As she disappeared into the corridor, Victor's gaze followed her. Not with amusement anymore, but with a strange intensity. Somewhere deep inside, something was shifting. He didn't know it yet. But this woman, the one he'd mocked for her English, was about to rewrite the story of his life in a language he'd never understood before. The next few days, Elena tried to slip back into her routine, but life has a way of following those who try to outrun it. The hotel buzzed with whispers, staff gossiping about the waitress who had somehow caught the attention of a millionaire. Some envied her, others pitied her, convinced she'd end up like so many before, used, discarded, forgotten. Elena ignored them. She had no interest in wealth or status. All she wanted was peace. But peace is rarely quiet for long. On the 4th morning, a letter arrived at the hotel front desk addressed to her. The envelope was cream-colored, embossed with a gold insignia. Inside was a simple card. My offer still stands. 10x your current salary. A new beginning. VH. Beneath the initials was a business card bearing Victor Harrington's private office address. Elena stared at it for a long time, torn between instinct and desperation. Her savings were vanishing. Her mother's treatments back home couldn't wait. And though something about Victor unsettled her, another part of her whispered that maybe this was her chance. Her only one. That evening, she took the bus across the city to the Harrington building, a sleek tower of glass and steel that sliced into the clouds. The receptionist greeted her warmly and guided her up to the top floor. The elevator doors opened to reveal a panoramic office overlooking the city. Modern, cold, and impossibly beautiful. Victor stood by the window, speaking on his phone in low tones. When he turned, that familiar glint of satisfaction appeared in his eyes. Elena? He said, ending the call. You came. I haven't decided anything, she replied, clutching her purse tightly. Of course, he said with a grin. But you're here. That's a start. He gestured to a chair. She sat, every sense on guard. I need someone I can trust, Victor began. Someone who can handle clients from Paris to Rome, Berlin to Madrid. Someone who won't crumble under pressure. You have talent, poise, and intelligence. And you're not afraid to challenge me. That's rare. And in return, she asked. He smiled. A salary of 8,000 a month. A private apartment. Full medical coverage. For you and your family. Her breath caught. It was more than she had dared to imagine. Why me? She whispered. Because when I looked at you, he said softly, I saw myself before the world taught me to hate weakness. The honesty in his words disarmed her. Against her better judgment, she accepted. That night, as she signed the contract, the city glowed like a field of stars below. She didn't know then that the pen she held would write the next chapter of her life in fire. The following weeks transformed Elena's world. She traded her uniform for tailored suits, the clatter of dishes for conference calls. She traveled beside Victor to meetings in Paris, Berlin, and Geneva, interpreting, negotiating, observing. Her sharp mind and calm composure earned her respect, even from those who doubted her at first. Yet, behind the boardroom brilliance, something else was happening. Victor began to change, slowly, subtly. The arrogance that once defined him softened around her. He listened more, laughed differently, asked questions instead of issuing orders. He even began learning phrases in other languages, awkwardly, but sincerely. One evening, after a long meeting in Rome, they dined on a quiet terrace overlooking the city. The sunset bathed everything in gold. I never asked, Victor said, breaking the silence. Why did you really learn all those languages? Elena smiled faintly. Because words can open doors that money can't. My father used to say that. Your father sounds wise. He was, she said softly. Until the war took him. Victor's expression shifted. I'm sorry. She nodded, staring into the distance. After that, my mother and I moved from country to country. I picked up languages like others pick up luggage. It wasn't ambition. It was survival. He studied her face, something stirring in his chest, something unfamiliar and unwelcome. Guilt, maybe, or admiration. He wasn't sure which. Lena, he said quietly. You deserve more than this life of running. She turned to him. So do you, she said gently. But you keep chasing numbers instead of meaning. Her words struck deeper than she knew. Victor looked away, unable to meet her gaze. Later that night, back at the hotel, he stood on the balcony alone, her words echoing in his mind. Chasing numbers instead of meaning. He realized she was right. Every deal, every dollar, every empire he built, it all felt hollow. The next morning, he called her into his office. Cancel my meetings for today, he said. She blinked. All of them. I need a break. And I think you do too. Come with me. To where? He smiled. Someplace quieter. An hour later, they were driving through the countryside, city towers shrinking behind them. Fields of gold stretched toward the horizon. Victor seemed lighter, freer than she had ever seen him. They stopped near a small lake surrounded by wildflowers. The air was clean, the world still. For once, there was no pretense between them. You know, Victor said, tossing a stone into the water, when I was your age, I thought power would fill the emptiness. Turns out, it just makes it louder. Elena smiled sadly. Then maybe it's time you learned a new language. One that money can't buy. He looked at her, confused. What language is that? Kindness, she said softly. For the first time, Victor laughed. Not the sharp, hollow laugh of a man who conquered the world. But the quiet laughter of someone rediscovering how to be human. Neither of them realized that the peace they found that day would soon be tested in ways neither could imagine. The weeks that followed the trip to the countryside felt different. Quieter, steadier, as though both Victor and Elena had begun to breathe in rhythm with a new kind of life. His tone in meetings softened. His temper faded, and the people around him noticed. The once imposing businessman who barked orders now listened, asked, and, on rare occasions, smiled for reasons other than profit. Elena's influence was subtle but powerful. She didn't preach or demand, she simply was. Her calm steadiness, her unwavering sense of dignity, began to ripple through the chaos of Victor's world. Even his board of directors whispered about her, unsure if she was his assistant, advisor, or something else entirely. But change, especially in the heart of a man like Victor, never comes without resistance, from the world or from within. One morning, while Elena was sorting through a stack of documents in his office, Victor stormed in, his composure shattered. His jaw was tight, eyes hard. Cancel everything today, he snapped. Elena looked up. Is something wrong? He threw a newspaper onto the desk. The headline screamed, Victor Harrington under investigation for financial misconduct. Her breath caught. Is it true? His silence said enough. It's a misunderstanding, he said finally. A rival company. Someone's trying to drag my name through the mud. Elena stood slowly. What happens now? What happens? He said coldly. Is that I fix it. And I don't need anyone's pity while I do. She stepped forward. Victor. I said I don't need pity. He barked, the old arrogance flaring back like a wound reopening. The words hung in the air, sharp as broken glass. For the first time in months, she saw not the man he was becoming, but the man he used to be. The one who hid behind wealth and power. He turned away, running a hand through his hair. His voice was lower now, rougher. You don't understand, Elena. People like me don't get second chances. If I fall, everyone I've built this for falls with me. She hesitated, then said quietly, maybe you've been building for the wrong people. He looked at her sharply, but her gaze didn't waver. That night, Victor locked himself in his office, drowning in paperwork and fury. Elena stayed late, working in silence outside his door. She didn't go home until dawn. When she found him asleep at his desk, a bottle of whiskey half empty beside him. She draped her coat over his shoulders and left without a word. The next few weeks were brutal. Investigators circled. Business partners withdrew. Journalists camped outside his building, sniffing for blood. Victor's empire, once unshakable, began to tremble. Through it all, Elena stayed. Translating documents, drafting statements, facing the press with quiet confidence while he fought to clear his name. But scandal changes people. It shows who truly stands beside you, and who only pretended to. One evening, after a long day of legal meetings, Victor found Elena sitting alone in the conference room, staring out the window. The city lights below flickered like restless thoughts. You should leave, he said softly from the doorway. She turned. Why? Because this is going to get worse. My accounts are frozen. My company's on the brink. If you stay, you'll go down with me. Yelena smiled faintly. You once said I reminded you of yourself. Maybe that's why I'm not leaving. He shook his head. You don't owe me this. I'm not doing it because I owe you, she said gently. I'm doing it because you're finally learning that you can't buy your way out of everything. And that lesson is worth standing beside. Something inside him cracked then, a fissure long overdue. Why do you care so much? He asked, almost pleading. Everyone else ran the moment things got hard. Why not you? She looked at him for a long moment before answering. Because I've been where you are. Not rich, not powerful, but cornered, lost. And someone once stood by me when they didn't have to. This is me doing the same. Victor's eyes softened. For the first time, gratitude replaced pride. Over the next months, they fought the storm together. Every meeting, every negotiation, every sleepless night, they faced it side by side. Slowly, painfully, the truth began to surface. The accusations were traced back to a rival CEO who'd forged documents to frame Victor. With evidence in hand, Victor cleared his name. But the victory didn't feel like triumph. It felt like rebirth. When the dust settled, he stood before his board and announced something no one expected. I'm dissolving half my holdings, he said calmly. Redirecting funds to language and education programs across Europe. I built my fortune chasing power. It's time I built something worth speaking about. The room erupted in murmurs, disbelief rippling through the crowd. But Alina, watching from the back, simply smiled. Later, as they stood outside beneath a pale evening sky, Victor turned to her. You once told me kindness was a language. I think I'm finally starting to learn it. She laughed softly. And how's your accent? Terrible, he admitted, smiling. For a moment, it felt like the world had quieted again. But life, as always, had one final lesson waiting. One that neither of them could prepare for. Spring arrived gently that year, as if the world itself was trying to make amends. The storms had passed, the headlines had faded. And for the first time in years, Victor Harrington wasn't living in defense of his own shadow. His new foundation, Lingua Vita, had begun sponsoring language programs for underprivileged youth across Europe. The same man who once mocked a waitress for her English, was now helping thousands find their voices. And beside him, always, was Alina. Their partnership had grown into something deeper than either of them had anticipated. It wasn't romantic in the way others might assume, it was something quieter. Something forged in respect and the shared memory of brokenness. They had become two sides of the same redemption. But one afternoon, as the city shimmered beneath the sunlight, Alina collapsed. It happened in the middle of a small conference room, mid-sentence, her words cutting off as her body gave way. Papers scattered across the polished floor. For a moment, time froze. Then chaos erupted. By the time Victor reached her, she was pale, her breath shallow. Elena, he shouted, his voice trembling in a way no one had ever heard. Elena, stay with me. Paramedics arrived within minutes. The sound of the sirens tore through the quiet streets, echoing like a warning he hadn't known he needed. At the hospital, he paced the hallway endlessly, his hands shaking. Hours passed before a doctor emerged, exhaustion etched into his face. She's stable for now, the doctor said gently. But there's something you should know. Victor's stomach sank. What is it? The doctor hesitated. It's her heart. A congenital condition. She's known about it for years. I'm afraid it's worsening. Without surgery, she doesn't have much time. Victor's world tilted. Surgery, then do it, whatever it costs. The doctor sighed. It's not that simple. The procedure is experimental. We'll need specialists, travel, months of preparation. And, he hesitated again. She doesn't seem to want it. Victor blinked. What do you mean she doesn't want it? She told us not to contact anyone. Said she's lived her life the way she wanted. That she has her reasons. He didn't wait to hear more. He stormed into her room, where Alina lay beneath a thin blanket, her face pale but peaceful. You knew, he said quietly. She turned her head toward him, her lips curving faintly. I did. And you didn't tell me. I didn't want pity. He sat beside her, his voice breaking. You think this is pity? You changed my life, Alina. You gave me. He stopped. Unable to find the right word. You gave me meaning. Don't you dare give up now. Her hand reached for his, trembling slightly. Victor, she whispered. I've been fighting for so long. Running, surviving. Maybe it's time to stop running. No, he said firmly, gripping her hand. You don't get to leave yet. Not like this. She smiled faintly, her eyes soft. You sound just like I did once. When I thought strength meant never letting go. He stood abruptly, his frustration turning to desperation. Then I'll find the best doctors in the world. We'll go anywhere. Zurich, Boston, Seoul, wherever it takes. Victor. I mean it, he said fiercely. You gave me back my soul. The least I can do is help you keep yours. For a long moment, neither spoke. The only sound was the quiet rhythm of the heart monitor beside her. Finally, she said softly. If you really want to help me, promise me one thing. Anything. Promise me that when I'm gone, if I'm gone, you'll keep building what we started. That you'll keep teaching people the one thing the world forgets to speak. He frowned. And what's that? Compassion, she said, closing her eyes. It's the only language that never needs translation. His throat tightened. Don't talk like that. But she only smiled, her voice fading. You'll understand soon. Days turned into weeks. Victor spent every moment arranging treatment, calling specialists, flying doctors in from across the globe. The once cynical millionaire who built his empire on power now begged for mercy at the doors of hospitals. Elena underwent surgery in late spring. The operation lasted 12 hours. Victor waited outside, staring at the sterile clock as minutes dragged into eternities. When the surgeon finally appeared, Victor's legs nearly gave out. It was a success, the doctor said. She made it. Victor exhaled, his knees buckling as relief flooded through him. When she woke, her first words were quiet but certain. You kept your promise. He smiled through tears. You gave me no choice. For weeks after, he visited her daily, reading to her from the language books they had once laughed over. The hospital staff began to call them the strange pair. The cold businessman who never left the side of the quiet linguist. But fate, as ever, is not easily outwitted. One evening, as Victor returned from a late meeting, the nurse stopped him in the hallway. Her eyes said everything before her words did. I'm sorry, she whispered. The world fell silent. Elena had slipped away in her sleep, peaceful, smiling, as if she had simply translated herself into another kind of silence. Victor didn't speak for days. He shut himself in his office. Her name echoing through his mind like a word he didn't know how to pronounce. It wasn't until weeks later, when he opened her old notebook left on his desk, that he found the letter addressed to him. And what it said would change him forever. The letter was written in her delicate, looping handwriting. Each line steady, precise, as though she had known exactly how he would read it. The envelope was faintly scented with lavender, the same perfume she had always worn, light and impossible to forget. Victor sat at his desk for a long time before unfolding the paper. His hands trembled as his eyes traced the words that would become the most important he'd ever read. To dear Victor, if you're reading this, then my journey has ended, and yours must continue. Please don't let grief silence the lessons we learned together. You once told me power was everything. I told you words were stronger, and I think now you believe me. We build walls to feel safe, but sometimes safety is just another kind of prison. You taught me that even those who seem unshakable can still break, and that kindness isn't weakness. It's courage. Don't lose that courage now. You have the gift of influence. Use it not to be remembered, but to remind others that they matter. Speak the languages of those who have no voice. Listen to the ones who were never heard. And if someday you hear a stranger speak with the same fire you once mocked in me, smile. It means the language lives on. Thank you for letting me be seen. Not as a waitress, not as an employee, but as a soul. That's more than I ever asked for. Elena, by the time he reached the final line, Victor's tears had blurred the ink. He pressed the letter to his chest, shaking silently, every piece of him breaking and rebuilding all at once. For hours, he sat in that stillness, the city humming faintly outside his window. The empire he had once ruled meant nothing now. The only treasure he had left was her memory, and her message. The next morning, he called a press conference. Cameras flashed as journalists crowded the hall, expecting another business announcement, another self-congratulatory speech. But what they saw instead was a man stripped of pretense. Victor stepped to the podium, holding the letter in his hand. His voice trembled at first, but steadied with every word. I built my life believing money could buy everything. Respect, loyalty, even love, he began. But I was wrong. True worth doesn't come from what you own. It comes from what you understand. He looked down at the paper, his voice softening. There was once a woman who worked in this very hotel. Someone I treated as invisible. She spoke 5 languages, and through them, she taught me the 6th. The one no one can fake compassion. He paused, the silence thick with emotion. Her name was Alina. Everything I do from this day forward will be done in her name. The audience was silent, every camera still. That day marked the rebirth of Victor Harrington. Not as a mogul, but as a messenger. He turned Lingua Vita into a global foundation for education, building schools in refugee camps, funding scholarships for girls, and opening free language centers in cities where opportunity had no tongue. On the walls of every center hung a single quote, engraved in stone: Tor. Compassion is the only language that never needs translation. Years passed. Victor grew older, his hair streaked with silver, his voice slower but stronger. The world began to remember his name not for the empires he built, but for the lives he changed. And yet, every evening, he still returned to the same lake where he and Elena once stood surrounded by wildflowers. He would sit on the bench by the water, a notebook in his lap, and read aloud from her favorite books. Sometimes he imagined she was there beside him, her laughter in the wind, her calm presence in the rippling surface of the lake. One spring afternoon, as he sat beneath the fading sun, a young girl approached him. She carried a worn dictionary and a shy smile. "Excuse me," she said softly, "are you Mr. Harrington?" He nodded. I go to one of your schools," she said. "My teacher told me you're the reason I get to learn languages. I wanted to thank you." Victor's throat tightened. "What's your name?" "Helena," she replied. For a moment, his breath caught. "Helena?" "Yes," she said, beaming. "My mother said she named me after a woman who once helped her. She said this woman believed that kindness could change the world." Victor smiled, tears gathering in his eyes. "Your mother was right." He handed her the notebook he'd been holding. A worn leather journal filled with Elena's old lessons and his own reflections. "Take this," he said gently. "It belongs to someone like you now." She clutched it tightly. "Thank you, Mr. Harrington." As she ran off, the wind carried the faint scent of lavender through the air. Victor looked up at the sky, his lips curling into a small, grateful smile. "Seems you're still teaching me," he whispered. The lake shimmered under the evening light, its surface golden and still. Somewhere